The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 35. Castle Wyvern. As the next domain on my itinerary was an island, I once again found myself chartering a boat in order to travel there. I knew from my research that the name Castle Wyvern did not indicate that the domain was a castle and nothing more. An entire city-state had sprung up around the castle in the 1,000 years since it had been abandoned, with its name serving as a reminder of its past. I also knew about the city's most famous feature, its unique architecture, although knowing about it and seeing it are two separate things. When the boat emerged from the mists and I saw Wyvern's skyline, I gasped aloud, and I heard several around me doing the same. Those in the boat who were natives of Wyvern chuckled at us, for apparently the sight of visitors goggling upwards at the enormous buildings has become something of a punchline. I let them chuckle all they wanted, for the sight was astonishing. The buildings climbed up and up and up, some of them so high that their summits were hidden by the clouds. I even caught a glimpse of the castle itself, removed from its original foundations and rebuilt stone by stone upon the tallest building in the city. When I asked one of the native Wyvernians on the boat about the castle, his face grew dark. Apparently it has something of a haunted reputation, for it was the original home of the Gargoyles, not the brutish elemental creatures that I know by that name, but something that, to hear the Wyvernians tell it, was closer to a demon, intelligent and murderous. Although the Gargoyles are regarded as mere legend today, there are those who still watch the skies fearfully at night for any sign of leathery wings, and, as I learned before leaving, they were right to do so. The Lord. Castle Wyvern answers to a ruling council of nobles, led by the wealthy and ambitious David Xanatos. Born a fisherman, Xanatos was able to parlay a rare coin into a fortune that would make Prince John weep with envy. Many on the council resent answering to an up-jumped peasant, but Xanatos' undeniable brilliance and charm have ensured that his position at the head of the council is secure. For now. I thought at first that Xanatos was the Lord of Wyvern in more ways than one, for my research uncovered countless miraculous strokes of good fortune for Xanatos and ill favor for his rivals that suggested a spider weaving 100 webs of intrigue. However, as I looked into the history of the domain, particularly those legendary gargoyles, another possibility suggested itself. While gargoyles feature in Wyvern's modern art only as fantastical creatures and are derided in all scholarship from the past several centuries, the oldest history and artwork depicts them matter-of-factly, fighting alongside humans as literal beings of flesh and blood, or lifeless stone during the day. Furthermore, unlike the somewhat generic demonic bogeymen of modern art, each gargoyle in the older pieces was unique. Some bearing enormous beaks or Hadesy-like wings, others distinctive scars or remarkable size, suggesting either that artists in older times were more creative, or that they were basing their drawings on historical individuals. The one exception to this diverse iconography was a red-haired female gargoyle who appeared again and again, regardless of time period, fighting against raiders 1,000 years ago, battling alongside King Macbeth a century later, massacring a refugee camp a few centuries after that. She almost seemed an allegorical representation of Wyvern's changing attitudes toward the gargoyle myth, protecting humans in her earliest incarnations and slaughtering them in later ones. Accounts from the reign of King Macbeth lent credence to this theory, for they dubbed her Demona, a name that seemed too unsubtle for fact. Whether an avenging angel or merciless devil, two characteristics of Demona remained constant. She was inextricably linked to violence and death, and no allies ever followed her from one era to the next. She traveled through the centuries alone. The land. According to those older, now discredited accounts, which I am more inclined to believe than the modern ones for reasons that will soon become clear, the island housing Castle Wyvern originally belonged to the gargoyles alone. Before any humanoids settled there, gargoyles made their homes in its cliffs and caves. When the first humans arrived, fleeing violence on the mainland, the gargoyles agreed to welcome them. Eventually, the humans built Castle Wyvern and declared it a refuge for all of those who sought to escape war and persecution. A situation that reminded me of Encanto or Rosas, except that in this case, their utopian ideals actually prevailed for a time. The Gargoyles defended the castle from any intruders who might follow the refugees, and the humans were grateful for their protection. Of course, this idyllic situation could only last so long before fear, jealousy, and resentment appeared. As more and more refugees came, the Gargoyles balked at sharing their home with a population that now outnumbered them 10 to 1, many of whom could not pull their own weight in battle. Several of the humans, meanwhile, were newly arrived to the island and frightened of the Gargoyles' massive size and monstrous appearance, stoking further enmity. Matters came to a head when the castle was besieged by raiders, leading to arguments over how the dwindling resources should be distributed, with several humans voicing their fears that the Gargoyles would eat them. Eventually, some of those in the castle decided that the enemies without were preferable to those within, and opened the gates to the raiders during the day while the Gargoyles were stoned. The castle was ransacked and the Gargoyles smashed in their stone sleep. Eventually, humans returned to resettle Castle Wyvern, but the Gargoyles were all but extinct, resurfacing briefly and rarely in the histories, only to vanish again. Over the past 1,000 years, a continuous influx of immigrants has transformed Wyvern into a massive, thriving metropolis, but because the island is so small, it can only grow upwards, not outwards, leading to those magnificent buildings that seem to touch the sky itself. In recent years, David Xanatos went so far as to have the original castle moved to the top of his towering estate, as I saw on my arrival. While the specific betrayals of the past are long forgotten, after all, with the exception of the paranoid or superstitious, no one will admit to believing in gargoyles during the day, treachery remains widespread in Wyvern. Xanatos is hardly the only member of the ruling council to have off-the-table alliances with foreign powers or criminal elements, and there are few members of the City Watch who are not on the payroll of one notable family or another. Other than the absence of food tasters, it reminded me in many ways of Borca, save that Xanatos, with his lack of noble blood or aristocratic family ties, is in a far more precarious position than any Baritsi or Delisnia, which doubtless gives his scheming a layer of particular urgency. Dread possibilities. There was a certain frustrating lack of direction in my investigation of Castle Wyvern. Although Xanatos ruled the domain, those legends of gargoyles seemed significant, particularly their recurrent image of Demona. Try as I might, I could not bring these elements together into a cohesive picture. Only one thread connected them that I could see: the castle itself. Given his reputation, I was certain that Xanatos had moved it to his property for a reason, and that uncovering that reason was critical to understanding the realm. I anticipated, correctly, that Xanatos' ego would make him amenable to an interview, and I played the wide-eyed admirer as he gave me a rather tedious tour of his business operations, and a far more impressive look at his personal collection of magic items, although of course I had no doubt that only the most trivial of them were on display.
I've been forced to increase security ever since the Eye of Odin was stolen,
he said casually.
Of course, you already knew all about that.
I flinched. For a moment, I could see the Eye of Odin glowing. Could feel myself crushed against the inside of my own skull to make room for Thanos as he bludgeoned his way in. I plastered on a polite smile, clasping my hands to keep them from shaking. Whatever do you mean?
I'm sure you did your homework before coming here. You must have heard about the theft.
His tone remained light, but I caught a touch of a smirk on his face. Ah. My smile had more teeth. I understand you perfectly now. The smirk gave way to a slight frown, and he handed me a finely embroidered handkerchief that must have cost more than my entire wardrobe. I took it, puzzled, then felt something wet on my upper lip. Marvelous! A running nose on top of the embarrassment of being so obviously discomfited. I dabbed at my nose with the handkerchief. It came away red. We made a few awkward pleasantries before Xanatos' chamberlain Owen escorted me from the premises. By creating a distraction with some well-aimed uses of Mage Hand, I was able to slip away and double back to the castle. Night had fallen, giving the ancient structure an eerie, haunted quality. Eldritch sight confirmed that the hair on the back of my neck was only rising due to an overactive imagination rather than to any magical auras, and I set to exploring as quickly as I could before Owen or Xanatos tracked me down. My initial impression was disappointment, for it seemed that the castle had primarily been converted into a living area. It had been enhanced with artificer magic to make it a luxurious modern home rather than an ancient ruin, but was this nothing more than a monument to David Xanatos' hubris? Was this simply his way of saying that, fisherman or no, he deserved to live in the rightful home of the ancient kings of Wyvern, and would literally look down upon his rivals from this towering vantage point? I caught movement from the corner of my eye and flattened myself against the battlements. As I did, I saw an odd pile of stone shards at my feet, as thin as parchment. I picked up a piece the size of my hand. It looked remarkably similar to the mist talisman that had brought me here. Something massive landed on the parapet behind me, snarling like a great cat. I whirled and found myself staring into the glowing red eyes of something that seemed ripped out of a nightmare, a creature of wings, claws, and teeth that towered over me as though I were a child. I immediately recognized her as Demona. Before I could say or do anything, she grabbed me by the arm and hurled me from the walls of the castle as easily as if I were a doll. Had Xanatos built a smaller monument to his ego, I would certainly have been killed. As it was, I had more than enough time to cast Fly before hitting the ground. I made my escape, having confirmed that gargoyles were entirely real, and that Xanatos is well aware of this fact. Parting thoughts. It is clear that Demona and Xanatos have some sort of alliance. I do not know if they consider themselves equal partners, or if he has somehow harnessed her the way that King Haggard harnessed the Red Bull. As both she and the castle have a centuries-old connection to the land, I can only imagine their mystical potency. I suspect it will end in treachery and slaughter, for these seem to be the favored currency of both parties. Given the domain's history, Demona is likely to survive it. I wonder whether the same is true of Xanatos. I have begun my research into the next domain on my itinerary. I did not expect to recognize anything at all, for it is barely featured on any maps and has little impact on other domains beyond its copious lumber exports, hardly the sort of realm to have a presence outside its own borders. However, as I studied a book about its arcane history, a glyph caught my eye. A circle of symbols with a triangle at its center. I had seen this glyph before, on one of the murals in Atlantis. Scrawled beneath it in the Atlantean tongue had been the words, "Do not summon at all costs." Regards, D.
My little scholar is correct in that the majority of gargoyles are elemental creatures, with intelligence akin to a wild beast, or perhaps a certain mercenary with an inclination toward falconry. Gargoyles can also be created by a wizard or priest who utilizes them as stalwart guardians. Regardless of their origin, gargoyles share a common trait: the need to defend something, usually a place, particular object, or even a lineage. It is their nature. Which begs the question, what does this Demona defend when, by all accounts, she has nothing left of her past but herself? Something tells me she would not demean herself by defending Xanatos' purchased castle, nor the relics he hoards within. A pity you were unable to examine his private collection. Confirmation of the whereabouts of the Phoenix Gate and the Grimorum Arcanorum would have been beneficial to our endeavors. No matter. If what we seek was there, Thanos would have stolen it along with the Eye of Odin.
This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Azalin Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at DarklordAzalin. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening.